Hey folks, this is Kelani. A lot of different features have been added and removed as the World of Warcraft has progressed and evolved. Some were removed or replaced, but others have become integral parts of the game we still play today. But which features stand out amongst the many? Let's have a look at my top 5 best features that have ever been added to the World of Warcraft. There was a time where if you didn't have the right amount of people for a given raid, there were a few choices you'd have to make. If you wanted to raid the 25-man modes but didn't have 25 people, you would have to drag in a few friends or pugs, or you just wouldn't be able to raid. On the flip side, if you were a 10-man raiding guild but had more than 10 people on any given day, someone was always left out. All in all, deciding between just 10 or 25 left a lot to be desired, but thankfully back in Mists of Pandaria the flexible raid system was added. Originally, the flexible raids were actually a new difficulty which was placed between Raid Finder and Normal and was only available to the Siege of Orgrimmar raid. As we went forward into the Warlords of Draenor expansion, the flex system was expanded to include Raid Finder, Normal and Heroic modes. Everything was shifted a little, and the highest difficulty of raiding was renamed to Mythic, which remains to be the only raid difficulty which isn't flexible. This was kind of a 1-2 combo. Every other difficulty became very accessible for a wide range of people, and Mythic raids could be scaled to the static 20-player requirement, allowing for tighter tuning. There's still an argument out there about bringing back the hardest content for smaller guilds, but since the changes we've had some amazing Mythic encounters added to the game. Being able to take in 10 people one night and bring along the extra few who are online for a subsequent night is an amazing feeling. You can take as many people up to 30 as you like, but if you want to stick to 10, that's perfectly fine too. And the best part is you can run with anything in between. All boss abilities scale with how many people you take, and so does the loot you're rewarded with, so usually taking extra people is never a bad idea, as long as they pull their own weight. I wonder where we would be if we were still stuck to just 10 people or just 25 people when we were heading into Normal or Heroic. You can be sure that pugging would be a whole lot more frustrating. We've got 9 people and just need a healer. But the only healer in queue is also with a DPS. I guess we're waiting or kicking a DPS then. And getting up to 25 people might not be that difficult to do some days, but when people start leaving and you're in that awkward 16 to 20 area, about halfway between dropping down to 10 and getting more people for 25, isn't that just a great feeling to be able to say, oh well, let's just go with what we have, and not get penalised for it at all? And that's not even taking guild groups into account. Maintaining a roster of 20 plus players to make sure you can raid Mythic difficulty can be pretty stressful, but if you're not interested in Mythic and just want to run Normal or Heroic with a group of friends, it's awesome that there aren't these huge restrictions placed on that area of the game anymore. I truly love that raiding in World of Warcraft allows for such flexibility, and I wouldn't be surprised if flex raids started popping up in other games which try to introduce raiding as a form of endgame content. Now, many of you probably don't remember a time before achievements, and it's actually pretty difficult for me, but if I try hard enough I can recall a time where every little thing wasn't tracked for you, and you had to go without earning special points for any and every activity you do in the World of Warcraft. Way back when Wrath of the Lich King launched, this fancy new system allowed you to basically track what you've already done in the world and everything you have yet to discover or experience. The achievement system launched with 749 individual achievements which covered world exploration and quest completion, PvP, PvE, professions and general character development. Obviously that number has increased significantly since with the addition of the Cataclysm, Mists of Pandaria, Warlords of Draenor and now the new Legion expansions, which all brought with them droves of new and exciting ways to earn achievement points. Now, that's not to say everything was dull and bleak before the achievement system was put in place. Folks still hunted for the coolest mounts and still progressed through both PvE and PvP, but when a system was introduced which not only rewarded you for completing these sorts of tasks, but also tracked it for you, the number of people taking part in those activities grew and grew. It's also a pretty fantastic way of adding in new challenges to every type of World of Warcraft content. Achievements in dungeons can have you do anything from speeding through certain parts of a dungeon to whacking snails with a huge rock. Achievements in raids can force you to make a fight more difficult or put yourself in a less than ideal situation while still trying to kill the boss. Adding in this kind of variety can help keep content fun for longer, and it's a great way to reward those players who manage to complete their grocery list of achievements. Thankfully, the system has been added to and upgraded upon since its inception. Back in Mists of Pandaria, the vast majority of achievements became account-wide. That meant you could happily progress different achievements on different characters without having to feel like you're picking and choosing between your favourite classes. Everything became more account-focused, so you could reap the rewards of all your characters no matter which one you decided to play. Say what you will about the old days of finding groups for dungeons and raids, but spamming trade chat for an hour looking for a tank wasn't a fun experience. Getting to the dungeon only to have one of your group members leave because getting the group together ate up all of their playtime was even worse. It was a struggle and a half to get groups together if you weren't in a large active guild or didn't have enough friends to easily set something up. Thankfully, towards the end of Wrath of the Lich King, the Dungeon Finder was introduced. The Dungeon Finder essentially automated the whole group finding process, at least as far as dungeons were concerned. You could now sign up as a tank, healer or DPS, and the group would be created for you by pulling from the queue of active players also looking for a dungeon group. It was the start of something wonderful, and arguably the end of a good chunk of social aspect of grouping up in WoW, but having the efficiency of being able to hop into a group for some light-hearted dungeon content far outweighs the negatives of the system in my opinion. The Dungeon Finder doesn't stop people talking to each other and creating groups of their own, it just enhances the experience for those players who don't have friends to rely on or guilds to run things with, and also allows people to skip the legwork of having to actually get to the dungeons. That last part is a little controversial, but I'm actually fine with it now that mythic dungeons are a thing. They still require you to run to a dungeon and use the summoning stone, so I'm happy to have the easier, more casual focused normal and heroic dungeons have a queue system which allows you to teleport willy-nilly. This kind of system didn't just stop with dungeons though. The Raid Finder was introduced towards the end of Cataclysm, with Dragon Soul Raid being the first experiment. Raid Finder does get a lot of flack, but I think it's still a great addition to the game. It opens up raiding to those who don't want to step into the real thing for whatever reason, be that time commitments or just the stress that comes with finding a group. Staying within a group and spending a lot of time in general with said group, it might be the easiest thing in the world to hop in and out of normal and heroics for some of us, but for those players who either can't or don't want to, I'm happy they still get to experience the raid encounters to some extent. The last few expansions have been amazing when it comes to raiding content, and it would be a huge shame if that content wasn't in an accessible form which players could easily get into. Dungeon Finder and Raid Finder are quality of life systems which fundamentally changed how a lot of people played World of Warcraft, but I think there's something more important which is a natural evolution of those systems. The Group Finder was added with patch 6.0.2, which was the very start of Warlords of Draenor. Previously, players had relied on add-ons or third-party websites to put together groups quickly and efficiently for areas of the game which weren't covered by the Dungeon or Raid Finder. The Group Finder allowed players to look for groups or additional members for their group for pretty much anything you can think of. If you need a group for it, chances are there's one in the Group Finder just waiting for you to sign up. This makes almost any area of the game significantly more accessible and more efficient, so much so that I believe new systems and types of gameplay that are introduced will have to be built with the Group Finder in mind. If you want to head into a normal raid, go look for a group. If you want some help with a rare elite out in the world, create a group and people will join. I've seen several full groups active every time the weekly reset rolls around to take down the current world bosses. This is definitely a case of Blizzard looking at what players are actively going out of their way to do, in this case use third-party resources to quickly and easily create groups to do content together, and deciding that should be a system in the game itself. The Dungeon Finder, Raid Finder, and Group Finder all work together to provide us as players with the tools we need to get groups going for the content we're interested in, and altogether I see them as a fantastic addition to this game. The Legion expansion added a whole bunch of fantastic features to the ever-expanding World of Warcraft, but I think the most impactful was the rearrangement of how daily quests work. Going into Legion, we had this new concept of world quests, which wasn't really all that new to anyone who played Diablo 3, but it essentially gave us all the daily quests that were active for each given day. The world quests rotate and change, so it was kept quite interesting for at least a month or two before we started seeing the same world quests popping up again and again, but that was still way better than going to several quest NPCs who would give the same quests day in and day out, and we'd basically create a map for ourselves which plotted the most efficient way to knock out our full quest log of dailies. Yeah, Mists of Pandaria had way too many daily quests for sure, but in the form of world quests, we basically get to pick and choose which ones we'd rather do. If we want reputation for a specific faction, we can very easily see which world quests reward reputation with which faction, but more importantly, we could target rewards. If you only wanted to get some artifact power one day, you can see which world quests would be worth doing. Need a few more Order Hall resources? We can prioritize those world quests next. With the addition of emissary quests, you had a solid goal every day you logged in as well, if you wanted something extra to work towards. They even let you save up your daily rewards for up to 3 days, which meant if you wanted, you could get your dailies, quote unquote, done every 3 days without having to log in every day to play. Perhaps the best part of the world quest system is how flexible and versatile it is. If the dev team wanted to point us more towards one area of the game, or introduce new storylines into the game or new factions, they can add in new world quests without having to interfere with everything else going on in a zone. They took this so far as to replace an entire zone's world quests with invasion-based world quests whenever a Legion invasion came up. That kind of interaction between story elements and the world quest system has so much potential, and I'm excited to see what they decide to do with it in the future. Maybe I'm just being a little silly, but for some reason I much prefer having the world quests shown on the map as they are now, compared to when they were just a blue exclamation mark above a random NPC's head. They just feel more interesting than the daily quests we've had in the past, but maybe that's a testament to how the questing itself has developed, but some of the world quests that we have access to are downright nuts. There's one in particular that I'm thinking about when I say nuts, and I bet you can probably guess which one it is. The world quest method not only allows us to mix things up by rotating world quests constantly, but also allows the dev team to have some fun once in a while. Having some silly world quests pop up every now and then is a nice break from all the serious Legion stuff, and it doesn't have to be made available every day in a static list of daily quests. It's also a system which naturally grows as an expansion unfolds. When we went down to the Broken Shore, we had a whole new set of world quests available which were specific to the Broken Shore. When we moved on to Argus, once again we unlocked access to another round of world quests which are specific to that area of the game. I expect that when future events unfold we'll have world quests pop up wherever our duties take us, and I for one am very happy this system was introduced and fully expect it to be taken forward into the next expansion. Speaking of new expansions, I've seen quite a few expansion launches in my time. I've been around this block for a little while now, and I have to say I don't really recall any problems with the Legion launch. If you were around for Mists of Pandaria, you might remember having to form an orderly line for a few quests in the Pandaran starting zone and the Jade Forest. The Warlords of Draenor launch was significantly worse, with players being heavily bottlenecked within the first 20 minutes of questing. Legion didn't really have any problems, and the main reason why is sharding. If you're not familiar with sharding, basically we're all playing on mini-servers called shards. If you're running around Dalaran and you see a lot of people from a lot of different realms, chances are you're not on your home server shard, but instead on an overflow shard. When a shard has enough players running around in it, another one will be created for the next player who tries to zone in. It works like an overflow system so that you won't ever get to the point where your game lags out and crashes because thousands of players are trying to finish the same quest at the same time. Now, besides making launches of new content extremely smooth, this technology has some pretty awesome implications for the future of World of Warcraft. Any MMO that's come out recently has heavily relied on sharding technology because it just doesn't make sense to have 25 physical servers which are heavily restricted in how they can interact with each other. If you can get away with 3 physical servers and just use sharding to make sure your populations are sufficiently spread out so problems don't occur, that's so much more efficient. We also recently got some news that the dev team will probably start connecting servers again sometime soon. That means our number of unique physical servers will be reduced, but chances are you won't actually see any significant change because we all play on shards anyways. The key here is that home servers are still restricted quite significantly. Auction houses are tied to home servers, guilds are tied to home servers. You can't run certain content with players that aren't on your same home server. You can't trade with players not on your home server, etc, etc. Reducing the number of home servers by connecting realms pushes us closer to a mega server system, which has a whole bunch of pros and cons of its own, but I don't think we'll get there anytime soon, so we probably don't have to worry about it getting that far. What this will help with is those players who are stuck on a low population realm and don't want to pay quite a large chunk of gold or real money to transfer to a better server. Hopefully low population realms will be the first to receive some attention, but realms with vast population inequality quality might also be on that list. I won't pretend to know what the dev team hopes to accomplish with their server connecting adventures, but I do know that sharding has been a godsend for World of Warcraft as a whole. I'm super excited for another clean launch when the next expansion rolls around, and I love knowing that no matter how full my home server gets, I shouldn't ever see the long queues that were all too common before Legion. If I had any complaints about sharding, it would be that the world might feel a little emptier now when I'm just chilling in a city. Perhaps increasing the cap on shards could help with that, but so too could bringing more home servers together. I would also prefer to have the functionality and smoothness of the shards rather than have to deal with the lag and issues caused by masses of players in one small area. I guess finding the right balance there would be important, but either way it's great to see that even though World of Warcraft is over a decade old, the systems and technology that support it are still being kept up to date, sharding being one of the most important ones. So that's my top 5 features that have been added to World of Warcraft over the years. What does your list look like? Is there anything here that you don't agree with, or something that you think should have been on this list? Let me know in the comments section below. Remember to leave a like just below the video before you leave, and if you want to see more, make sure to subscribe. But apart from that, thanks for watching folks, good luck and have fun, and as always I will see you next time.